On the morning of July 17, 1999, America woke up to a headline it couldn't process. John F. Kennedy Jr. was missing. His plane had never arrived. His wife and sister-in-law were with him. The Coast Guard was searching, and across the country, in living rooms and offices and diners, people stopped what they were doing and felt something they couldn't quite name. It wasn't just worry, it was recognition. The feeling that this had happened before. For 3 days, the country watched and waited. The Coast Guard deployed cutters and aircraft across a 30-mile radius of Martha's Vineyard. Navy divers joined the search. Fishing boats from the island volunteered. The Kennedy compound in Hyannis Port became a command center and a gathering place for a family that had done this too many times before. Senator Ted Kennedy was there. Caroline Kennedy, John's sister, flew in immediately. The family released no public statements for the first 48 hours. They didn't have to. The silence said everything. On television, the coverage was wall-to-wall. Networks cleared their schedules. Anchors stood on the beaches of Martha's Vineyard and spoke in the hushed tones reserved for national tragedy. Strangers left flowers and candles outside John's apartment in Tribeca. On July 19th, pieces of the plane were found on the ocean floor, 116 feet below the surface, 7 miles off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. The bodies of John, Carolyn, and Lauren Bessette were recovered the next day. John was 38, Carolyn was 33, Lauren was 34. The NTSB investigation would later determine that the crash was caused by spatial disorientation. John lost sight of the horizon in haze and fog, the plane entered a graveyard spiral, and it hit the water at nearly 5,000 feet per minute. There was no mechanical failure, no sabotage, just a young pilot, in marginal conditions, making a decision that cost 3 lives. What happened next was extraordinary, and it revealed something about America that caught everyone off guard. The grief was enormous, not polite, not distant, enormous. People who had never met JFK Jr. wept openly. Memorials appeared across New York City and Washington. The front pages of every major newspaper carried the same word, lost. On July 22nd, the Kennedy and Bessette families held a private memorial aboard the Navy destroyer USS Briscoe. The ashes of John, Carolyn, and Lauren were scattered at sea off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, near the spot where the plane went down. It was a military honor, the kind given to a president's son, which of course he was. The next day, a public memorial mass was held at the Church of St. Thomas More on the Upper East Side. Over 300 guests attended. Political leaders, celebrities, childhood friends, and the people who had worked with John at George magazine. His uncle Ted delivered the eulogy. Ted Kennedy, who had buried 2 brothers, a nephew, and now his brother's only son, stood at the altar and said he had a survey course in grief that was too much for any human to bear. He called John the Kennedy who loved us all but didn't leave us, knowing the price for that love. President Clinton called the family privately. He later said that John's death felt like losing a member of his own family. Hillary Clinton, who was preparing to run for the Senate seat that John had been considering, suspended her campaign for 2 weeks. To understand why JFK Jr.'s death hit so hard, you have to understand what he was carrying, not just for his family, but for the country. John F. Kennedy Jr. was born on November 25, 1960, 17 days after his father won the presidency. He entered the world as America's baby. His first steps were photographed in the Oval Office. His 3rd birthday fell on the day his father was buried, and the image of him saluting the coffin became one of the most iconic photographs of the 20th century. From that moment on, he was never just a person. He was a symbol. He was the living, breathing reminder of everything Camelot represented: youth, idealism, possibility, a country that believed it was headed somewhere good. His mother, Jackie, understood this. As we explored in episode 4, she spent decades trying to give John a normal life, while the entire world wanted to turn him into a monument. She shielded him from the press. She pushed him toward independence. She knew that the weight of the Kennedy name could crush him if he wasn't careful. And somehow, it didn't. John grew into a man who carried the name with grace. He wasn't brooding or tortured or consumed by the legacy. He was warm, funny, self-deprecating, and genuinely kind. He made fun of himself. He rode his bike through Manhattan. He remembered people's names. That was the thing that made his death different from the other Kennedy tragedies. When JFK was assassinated, America lost a president. When RFK was killed, America lost a political movement. When JFK Jr. died, America lost something more personal. They lost the kid they'd watched grow up. They lost the proof that a Kennedy could carry the name and still be happy. They lost hope that this story might, for once, have a good ending. In the months after the crash, the full picture of what JFK Jr. had been building, which we explored in our last episode, became public. And it made the loss worse. The Senate seat, the political career he was quietly assembling, the advisors he'd been consulting, the 90% certainty. All of it leaked out in eulogies and interviews and magazine profiles, and Americans realized they hadn't just lost a celebrity. They'd lost a candidate, a future. George Magazine folded in 2001. Without John, there was no one to run it, and no one who could replicate what he'd built. The network he'd created, the relationships, the trust, the access, was personal. It died with him. Carolyn Bessette Kennedy's story was even more tragic in retrospect. She had been reduced by the tabloids to a difficult wife, a woman who couldn't handle the spotlight. After her death, her friends and family spoke publicly for the first time about who she really was. Intelligent, fiercely loyal, struggling with a level of public invasion that would break anyone. She was 33 years old. She never got to tell her own story. Lauren Bessette, Carolyn's older sister, was an investment banker at Morgan Stanley. She had nothing to do with the Kennedy mythology. She was simply a sister, going to a family wedding. Her death was a reminder that the Kennedy curse, if you want to call it that, didn't just take Kennedys, it took everyone near them. There is a moment in every long story when the last thread breaks, when the thing that connected you to the beginning is gone, and all that's left is memory. For the Kennedy story in America, that moment was July 16, 1999. JFK Jr. was the last connection. Not the last Kennedy. Caroline is still here, and there are dozens of Kennedy grandchildren and great-grandchildren scattered across the country. But John was the last one who carried the charge, the one who made people stop on the street, the one who made Americans believe, even against all evidence, that the Kennedy story might still have another chapter. When his plane went into the Atlantic, so did that belief. His father was killed in Dallas. His uncle Bobby was shot in a hotel kitchen. His mother spent 30 years running from a grief that never stopped chasing her. And John, the boy who saluted, the man who smiled, the prince who never wanted the crown, followed them all into history. If you've been with us since episode 1, you've watched this story unfold across 6 chapters. A family that reached for the highest things America could offer and paid the highest price. A son who tried to build something new on the wreckage of everything that came before. And an ending that, no matter how many times you hear it, never stops hurting. This has been Stories and Facts. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to this story all the way through. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The story of the Kennedys is the story of America. And like all great American stories, it doesn't end. It just echoes.